Hi, I'm Skipper Chong Warson, and you're listening to the second season of the How This Works show. Thanks for tuning in. I run a service design and facilitation business called How This Works Co. I also work as a leadership coach. Have you ever wondered about how people become really good at what they do? That's what this show is all about. I chat with folks about how they got started in some particular subject matter, where they are now, and a number of topics in between. Today, I have Carl Cleanthes, who runs a creative content agency in Hampton Roads, Virginia called Epic Made. We're going to talk about making art, creativity, what NFTs are and how he works with them, and then running a creative agency. Hey, Carl. Thanks for joining me today.
Happy to be here. Sounds fun already. So.
Well, Carl, let's start with kind of establishing for the audience our pronouns. I'm he, him. How should I refer to you?
He, him is fine as well. But as I say always, anything said with respect and kindness is fine with me. So.
Awesome. Dig it. So I said a little bit in the intro, in the pre-show about your area of expertise, but can you build on that with your own introduction?
Yeah, sure. I am a lifelong ADHD, extroverted, creative, kind of like counterculture, delightful weirdo or something along those lines. So
nice.
I started my business in art school in Norfolk, Virginia at ODU. And I started hiring the upperclassmen to do work that I didn't quite understand how to do yet, but I knew how to sell because I don't know why. I sold timeshares and shit in college. And like, I'm just like born entrepreneur kind of vibe, right? Like I always was flipping things and cards. And, you know, you hear Gary Vee and some of these guys talk about how they had that mentality of how to make money early on, right? So I was always buying and selling things. I got like crazy rich playing EverQuest in-game money, not like real money, but like there was a real economy in there, right? Yeah. So like all my friends would be like trying to get cool gear. And we played this game like crazy. This is like a predecessor to Warcraft 3 or World of Warcraft, excuse me. But long story short, I had like hundreds of thousands of dollars of like platinum, which was the currency in there, just because I loved the idea of buying things and selling them. And I would farm certain gear and then flip that. And if I saw it like come on the market from somebody else at a price I knew I could sell it higher for, I would buy and sell. So I stopped playing the actual role playing part of the game at one point. It was just like so hardcore into the economics. But that has served me, you know, moving forward. So, you know, in college, I started understanding just the high level of marketing and advertising and how to sell art and the value of art. And my father was an artist my whole life. If you could see the video of this, but check out my stuff, you could see videos. I have a lot of content of it. But my whole space here is covered in my art, my dad's art. The ceiling has art on it. It's a wild experience. But my whole life's been like that, right? Yeah. Like my dad's house growing up, the whole wall when you come in was just hundreds of paintings of beautiful abstract faces and colors and naked women and everything in between, right? Like it was amazing. It was artistic and beautiful. So that was always in me, as well as this idea of like, you know, how to make money and work on my own. I knew very early on that was fully unemployable from a consciousness, right? Like there's no way I could sit at somebody's desk and like clock it. And I tried a couple times, got like, I mean, probably clinically depressed, never went and actually got diagnosed. And then quit my job in 2007 on my honeymoon.
And what were you doing in 2007?
I was doing data work and IT security on base, the NMCI network. I don't know if anybody knows what that is. If you're in the military, you log into NMCI in the Navy and Marine Corps, you probably hate it. I was one of the techs you would call to bitch about how shitty the system worked.
Okay.
And this is 2007, right? So anyways, I quit that job, told a little white lie to the wife that I had about 3 months of work lined up and we're going to go for this entrepreneur thing. And have never looked back, right? Like never quit. I've been doing this ever since. And we've built the business up now to do animation, illustration, graphic design work for some of the biggest brands on planet Earth. We've worked with like Nickelodeon, SyFy, USA Network, TNT.
Nice.
I mean, WWE, long list of shit. All just really fun, really compelling, lots of animation work. It's like my dream job. It took me my whole life to build, but it's really fun. So that's the super high level. I don't know if that was too much of a diatribe, but anyways, that's me.
It's really good. I think that it already establishes a couple places to jump in, and you're so outgoing. So I'm bracing myself for this next answer. But is there a surprising aspect of your personality or your background that you'd like to share with the audience? I mean, something that you're comfortable with and something that people may not expect.
Sure.
The
I mean,
EverQuest thing was amazing, by the way.
oh, cool. I haven't thrown that out on a podcast yet.
Okay.
So there it is. That's first. If you don't know me from back in the day, you might not
Nice.
know much about that.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm afraid of being boring and normal, right? Like that's like in my soul. So I mean, like I wear shoes like maybe 30 hours a year. Like I'm mostly barefoot. I grow most of my food in my backyard.
Okay.
I try to upcycle or recycle everything and build all my desk. I built the bar back there. Redid the roof on my house. Like I love to make things. Like on my business card, it says createaholic, right? So I'm just trying to be in touch with everything around me. Like I do a lot of yoga. I love just kind of like zenness, and like I kind of have to balance that out because I am so extroverted and crazy. Like I also need those moments of just like deep like internal work, right? But yeah, I find that like walking in the woods, I do a lot of barefoot walks in the woods.
Okay.
And that's probably my thing. And then I wear exclusively toe shoes. Like I don't have I don't have normal shoes anymore.
And those are, so when you say you walk barefoot, does that mean in the toe shoes? And toe shoes, my understanding is that it's shoes, instead of having a solid front, they actually have space for all 5 of your toes.
Let's see here.
I love it. You're like, you're demoing it.
So okay. This is what a toe shoe looks like. Vibram actually sent these to me, and I did a custom art piece. So the other shoes with them right now.
Okay.
It's really cool. I'd love, but no one else can see that. But yeah, each one of your toes fits into a pocket.
Okay.
No, I consider that to be still wearing foot prisons.
I see. Okay.
So when I'm actually barefoot, I am 100% toes in the mud and the dirt and the sticks and the thorns, and I don't know, something about it feels very natural to me. It's very calming and resetting, because you can't run through the forest real fast. Like you have to go slow and pay attention, like, so otherwise you are going to stomp on a thorn.
Sure.
Yeah, anyways,
so be really deliberate. That's really interesting. Yeah. I know that there's some other philosophies around this, things like earthing, and the way that I usually describe it to people, I'm not as much of a barefoot person. However, I do think there's something to, like, if you go to a park and you're having a picnic or you're outside and you take your shoes off, and there is something that feels very freeing about that.
Yeah.
The instant you put your feet in the grass, put your feet in the ground, in the dirt, and I think there is something about that's a more natural state than putting on these toe prisons, as you say.
Yeah, I mean, there's like, I don't know the number because I'm not deep into anatomy and physiology.
Yeah.
But a metric shit ton of nerve endings in your feet that you are designed to feel the world around you, and like that all stimulates your nervous system. And there's all sorts of research and science behind that. But I grew up in rural Virginia on 3.5 acres, so that I didn't know any different. I just don't wear shoes.
I see.
We go down to the beach, don't wear shoes.
Right.
And my feet are really tough. Like I walk on rocks, hot asphalt, like doesn't matter.
Got it.
So there's a weird little note about me.
There you go. So let's get into the guts of the show, and let's just dive in. So you gave a little bit of it away in your introduction. I gave it a little bit away in the show's intro. What are the subjects that we're going to talk about today in which you are an expert?
I would consider myself to be an expert in, visual communication, some strategic marketing in some regards, right? Like I feel like marketing is such a broad concept, but like there are lanes in there where I would consider myself an expert. Okay. I absolutely love Web3, NFTs, all that sort of stuff. I don't know, expert's such a weird word because I'll never be so arrogant to think that there isn't so much more for me to learn in those subjects. But I would say the things that I'm deeply passionate about are art, creativity, marketing, visual identities, Web3, that sort of stuff. So. Yeah.
And I want to bounce that back to you. It is totally fair. The word expert has become really loaded in a lot of different ways. And we could have a whole sidebar conversation about this. But part of the reason why I asked that question in the way that I do is because I feel like for the most part, people don't take ownership of the things that they know, right? And that's something that I discovered doing this podcast. That's something I discovered before. And so I have a subversive goal of helping people to understand that they know more than they think they know just through their own conversation. So I absolutely agree with that. If someone asked me that question, I would rebound it very similarly. I don't know very much about this, but let's go ahead and have a 15, 20-minute discussion about it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I didn't used to think that I knew a lot about Web3 until I started talking to people that don't know anything, right? And then it's like, oh,
Yep.
it's like,
Yep.
because sometimes you get in these bubbles, right? That
Yep.
like everyone you talk to on the regular knows this baseline of things, but it's because they have that interest and have spent a lot of time there themselves.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about how growing up you were surrounded by art. Your dad did art, had a lot of art, lots of creative artifacts, visualizations. Is that how you first became interested in creative and visual work in this way?
Yeah. So I think I never became interested in it. I think
Okay.
everyone is interested in that. I think
Mm,
you're hard pressed to find a child that isn't excited about colors and excitement and creating art and doing things. I think what happened in my house was that it was never told to me that you need to grow up and be an adult and do something productive that isn't
ah,
colorful and wonderful and art and exuberant. My dad was like me, but like 20% more crazy, more energetic, more like, you know what I mean? Like he was just on the functional side of crazy is actually how I describe him.
okay. Okay.
But he was a wonderful, wonderful soul. But R.I.P. His birthday was on the 11th. He would have
Oh,
been
happy belated
80.
birthday.
I think it'd been 82, 81, 81.
Okay.
But yeah, so I say that was never stripped out of me. It was never
Okay.
devalued. So only amplified through my father, who was like, just, he stood out in a crowd no matter where he went, just because of the nature of who he was.
I see.
I think the flip side of that, the part of me that like got inspired to do this type of work, this like visual storytelling and super creative type of stuff. Because if you look at my agency, we're not like making Apple logos with lots of white space. Like we don't do any of that stuff. That doesn't excite me. Like it's got to have details and colors and ideas and creativity and just like
Right.
really be rich and inspiring. It's sort of, we call it maximalist versus minimalist, that kind of thing, at least leaning towards that direction. So,
Yeah.
but the things that inspired me to do this kind of stuff was absolutely video games. It was absolutely like fantasy storytelling and Lord of the Rings and playing EverQuest and reading books. And like The Fires of Merlin was like the only book I ever got through as a kid. Like it was so cool. And like, they had some like dude that like had this like magic antler you could crush up into a powder and like would turn you into a deer and they could run for like a while and like really cool shit, right? And like I never could read books because I'm too ADD. So I'd always do like Cliff Notes or whatever way I could like kind of hack the system so that I could still make honor roll. I went to like a math science accelerated high school and like really did well in school, but had to learn early how to adapt to the way my brain works. And like there was just no way I was ever going to like pre-plan my time for months at a time to sit down and read this book that I didn't really like. But the one time I got to pick the book I really liked, like I crushed it. And then honestly, I don't think I've read an entire book back to front like with paper. I do audiobooks because I can go for a run or do something instead. So yeah.
So and I plus one to that idea of there is something about being a kid that should be about that native creativity. And to your point, there should be something about being an adult that is still about that creativity. I can't tell you how many times I run into people, especially if I'm standing up a workshop or, some kind of activity where something has to be drawn, like even something very simple, like a technical drawing, on a whiteboard or the big fat black marker on a Post-it note. And the first thing I will hear from people, they will say something around the idea that they can't draw, and which I think is bullshit. Unless you have a physical impediment, everyone can draw. Now, whether or not you can draw to the level you want to, or you like to draw, or any of those things, everyone is able to draw.
1,000% agree with that. And the physical impediment thing is probably just an excuse unless you're a complete vegetable in a coma.
Right.
Because I've like seen people do masterful paintings with a paintbrush in their mouth because they're a quadriplegic. I've seen a lady do drawings with both hands and both feet at the same time on the full other end of the spectrum. So 4 simultaneous drawings. But it really is a matter of learning from the masters, the gurus in the space that can teach you how to translate what you see to the paper, and that's a lot what you do in art school, right?
Yeah.
And then practice, and that's it. There's no magic formula.
Yeah. So you mentioned going to ODU, and is that Old Dominion University? Is that
Yes, sir.
okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Old Dirty.
Is that another nickname for it?
Yeah, that's what we call it back.
Nice.
And then we all laugh like that.
Right. Of course. It's part. It's part of the line, right?
Yeah.
So take me back to when you started to get more. I don't know if serious is the word, but you wanted more than just what was happening in your home life. You wanted to be more informed by other things. Like, take me back to where you started in how you began to cultivate this for yourself, not just be surrounded by it.
Which part of this?
Sorry.
Mean like,
yep.
Yeah.
Great distinction. So I guess let's start with your creative work. Like, how did you begin to create? How did you devise your own creative form, personality, etc.?
Yeah. So I guess, early on, I liked art. I used to draw a lot as a kid and all these weird little monsters and all kinds of stuff. And my parents got a divorce, an ugly divorce, if I could say that, when I was a kid. Now, they were both in our life and like they did the best co-parenting they could do and did well.
Sure.
But the best thing they ever did was get a divorce, right? Like that was the best thing they ever did for us, like, because it was pretty toxic. So I say all that to say, like, I kind of used to lose myself in my art as a kid, all the way up to like, sixth grade, around like 12 or so. And then I applied to be in the ODC art school, which is like this real cool, like, school that you can go to. And I've dumped all these hours into making my, little application, right? I get accepted to like go there for the day of, and like, so this is like step 2 where like, you go test it out, and they, blah, blah, blah. And I was so excited. And like all the things they assigned me to do while I was there, I just completely bombed. Like, I just wasn't inspired, drawing garbage stuff. They didn't let me into the program. I never did art again. I didn't do art from 6th grade till senior year, till after I graduated high school. Right. So I just went all math and science. Right. So I started taking algebra and like trigonometry and geometry. I mean, they ran out of math classes for me to take by the time I was a junior in high school. I'd already taken AP Calc. There was nothing else. So senior year, I just took another computer programming thing. Right. So fast forward, I go to ODU, I get into there, I'm doing preview day with my dad comes with me. And we're walking around, and they're like, all right, well, we need to set up your schedule for next, semester. And I didn't know what I wanted to study. I had no idea. I was just like, I'm going to go to college because I think I should, maybe. My parents never told me. I was the first one in my generation to go. And it was like, okay, let's go to college. So I'm there, and they're like, well, what do you want to do? I was like, well, I love video games. Like, I forgot to mention this earlier. Blizzard. Blizzard and Chris Metzen, actual, oh my God, massive inspiration. During that time before I quit doing art, I used to draw all kinds of stuff from like Mortal Kombat and all the Blizzard games like Gul'dan and all the cool stuff from like Diablo and Warcraft and all that. And that was huge until I stopped doing art entirely in middle school. It fizzled out right after I got out of, like, I got rejected from ODC. Anyways, long-winded. That's where I ended up. My dad was just like, cut the lady off, because I was like, I want to make video games, because I'd already done computer programming and I was really deep into the weeds on that. And I loved that too. And he's like, the lady asked me, well, what do you want to do, art, or do you want to do the programming? And my dad cuts the lady off and goes, no, he wants to do the art. I was like, let's do the art. Literally. But my dad knew me, right? And he'd seen me and seen me grow up. But, and like, I don't think I would have had, I would have been like I don't know what would have happened if he had said nothing, or if I had picked computer, or if you would have picked
computer.
Yeah. I might be sitting here with like a comb over and like a button up and like,
still in that
all clean cut, like
exactly, still in that tech support job.
245 pounds. So dude, that's where I was going. I was getting so fat and so miserable, and I hated it. Anyway, so that was like the pinnacle moment. So then I went into the art department, and then like every single class, I fell in love with the medium. It didn't matter if I was making stuff out of paper, if we were doing figure drawing, or if we're doing like, woodworking, or doing like any kind of, like, I did blacksmithing and I made these knives, and like, it was just like fucking cool.
So you did everything. You were like, everything. Yes,
let me make shit, like get out of the way and give me tools to make cool things. And it was so empowering. And I remember early on, one of my professors that passed away now, Victor Pickett, I was trying to cut this piece of paper in half, and like, I was like, man, I need a ruler and blah, blah, blah. And I like my whole, science brain. I need to be, and he's like, what are you talking about? I was like, you're an artist.
Right.
He's like, well, eyeball it. make sure it's about how get it right in the hat. Like artists can do anything. Like you don't need a ruler. And I was like, oh, cool. So then I grabbed the thing, and I touched it, and I folded it, made a little crease, boom, cut it perfectly in half with the big chip. But it was like the first time someone in my life outside of my crazy father, who, you know, is discountable in some ways in terms of like, you know, he's my dad, he loves me, and he's clearly an artist. But this guy was like, artists are the most powerful people in the world, was like the message he delivered to me that,
Nice.
you know, in that moment. So anyways, that all kind of set me on this trajectory that just, I've never looked back. It's been full speed ahead.
Okay. So you're at university, you're basically taking everything they're giving you and you're saying yes. And you're like, I'm going to try this. I'm going to try this. And then you said something in your intro about how at some point you started shifting, I think you said away from the doing and more towards like the positioning and maybe some of that EverQuest selling, bartering, trading.
Yeah.
What started to happen there? Like, fill out that side of the painting for me.
Yeah. So I started, like, I'm always talking and networking and communicating. And I started my first business at 19.
Okay.
Right out of high school. So, you know, first year in college. And we were doing like website as a software as a service before there was SaaS. No one knew what SaaS was back then. You know, 2003, right?
Okay.
So I was doing that and selling websites, and we started to get more into like, well, people needed branding and graphic design things, but like I'm still a freshman in college, so I hadn't even taken any design courses. I don't know how to do any of this shit. So like I just started going over to like the juniors and seniors, like, hey man, I got a thing, and like they, you know, want to buy this, and like I need some help with that. So I started just like immediately delegating and going, all right, well, how much do you want to do that? Okay, cool. And then I'd like 2 or 3x that and sell it to this other person, right? And that's like where the real spirit of what I'm doing now was born. That business only lasted about 9 months. My partner and I had totally different values and different ethos about everything. And so we split up, closed that business down, and then just started learning stuff myself for a while. Until I'd say like my senior year, and I was there for 5 years because I like had a terrible knee injury. I had to get my knee rebuilt, and like I just took my classes way down to part-time for like 2 semesters. But I say that to say, fast forward to once I knew how to do this stuff, then I started up my own little business with my wife's business partner, who was really into my wife's cousin. He became my business partner. And he really was really great at programming and had a deep love for that. So he was building websites, and I was doing all the branding and designing and all that sort of stuff. And I was getting my teacher actually to go, I said, hey, look, you know, I got this website for my friend's restaurant that he just opened. Like, can I do this for this project? You just assigned us a website, but it was very arbitrary. It was like, hey, you need to build a website, pick a subject matter, pitch it to me. So then it really, this actual business was born from that. Like 2006, you know, fast forward to 2006, I'm building this business, and my first clients I'm bringing on are actually me getting paid to do my schoolwork, which was like
double duty.
The real hustle. But I love that, like, ooh, how do I double down? Now I'm getting an A, and I'm doing client work, and I'm getting paid, and I was like, oh my God, this, like, it felt so good. So that's where this was actually born. And I've never stopped since. Like, I've been doing, you know, I had a full-time job. Like I said, at that time, I started working on the help desk doing tech support shit, which was just like rudimentary. But it made me miserable, and I hated it. Like I literally had like a pit in my stomach every Sunday. Like when I woke up, you know, about noon, I'd be like, I gotta go to work tomorrow. I gotta do school. I do school from 9 to 3, and then I'd be 3:30 to midnight at this job. Fucking hated it. Hated it. And I had to be away from my fiance at the time, and like all of it was really miserable for me.
Got it.
So
you previewed a little bit of that flip out of the thing that you described with your wife's cousin. Was that, and you were doing during school, is that what became Epic Made, or?
Yes. So that's actually, the business at the time was called Creative Art and Design Studios, which is still the legal name of the business. I just rebranded and got a DBA. But yeah, that is the genesis. Like, we started, me as an art student in 2006 at ODU, getting paid to do work, which is funny because the building now where the art studio used to be is now the Strom Entrepreneur Center at ODU, where like they help launch businesses post college. And I was like, yeah, I'm the first business that launched out of here. So I love to tell that story.
Nice.
So. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. So then you decide to go pro, you leave behind your tech support job,
Yep.
and like what are the changes or shifts that you made in taking, creative art and design studio into that this is my job, this is my focus.
I did the really methodical, strategic operation of just quit your job and figure it the fuck out. Like,
Step 1, step 2. Yep.
so step two, create panic. But look, there is no innovator like necessity, right?
Right.
Like,
Right.
and look, I'm not saying that's a great idea for people that have like
Right.
a mortgage and 3 kids and a wife and like whatever. But it was me and my wife, and we lived in the garage that we converted into an apartment at her mom and brother's house that they
Okay.
owned.
Okay.
So like I had very little risk at the time. I had
Yeah.
a Land Rover, which was stupid, that I bought when I was working that tech support job, and I was making great money there, and I'd
Yeah.
saved up a little money, but not like maybe a couple grand, right? And we were spending a lot of money. We had just had a 200 person fully catered wedding on a farm on the Eastern Shore. Like we were blowing money. Like
Sure. Yeah.
so yeah, but for me it was the realization that like I was going every day I stayed at this job, I was going to go deeper into depression.
Sure.
I was going to get sadder and more upset and more anxiety and more overweight. And I'm eating more bullshit food because we only have a 30-minute lunch break when I got to run down the street. And the only thing you can really do is fast food, or I got to pack a lunch, but I got at school. So I got to pack a lunch at 8 in the morning
Sure.
that I'm going to eat at like 9. It's really a dinner that I'm going to eat at 9.
Right.
And it's like, this is like, what are we doing? So then it's like microwavable bullshit. It's like the
Right.
whole lifestyle. I was like, there's no amount of money that I'm going to trade for my life and my
Yeah.
happiness and my well-being.
Yeah.
So I quit the job and I just literally figured it out.
Okay.
And to be honest, the first, I'd say from 2011 till like, so I quit in 2007. So 2007 to 2011, I was not doing what I needed to be doing. I was barely scraping by. I had the support system of, my family and my wife's family and my wife at the time, right? We got married. So yeah.
Yep.
But anyways, we're still together, been together 20 years. Love my wife. That all sounded stupid, but it was the support system I had that allowed me to slowly build and get clients. But I mean, we're talking like I was doing like 11 grand, 15 grand, 25 grand in the whole year, right? Like
Right.
you can't, no one's living off that. So I had to have a support system.
Yeah.
And that was more money, pre-COVID than it is post-COVID by a long
Sure.
shot, but even still. But what happened in those times is it allowed me to set a mindset of like, I don't spend money on anything that isn't a necessity or has an opportunity to have an ROI. Right. So like, I'm not buying a flashy car. I'm not
Right.
I don't go spend a bunch of money on clothes. Like even now, like this is a really nice black t-shirt. Like, but I got it at TJ Maxx for $7 on the clearance rack. Right.
Right.
Because why am I going to spend $60 on a really nice t-shirt? Like when there's places to do that. Right. So every piece along the way, I've started to like, how am I less and less dependent on giant corporations that probably don't care about me and my family? And how do I spend more of my time making sure that like my money goes as far as possible? Like I grow a lot of my own food, both for health reasons and it just saves money. Like one green pepper's $3, an organic green pepper.
Sure.
Well, I've got 75 of them just chilling on the vine out there, and I'll pick them all I want,
Right.
So that kind of stuff is all built into that mindset. And that's what I learned in that gap from 2007 to 2011 when I was trying to get my ass together, but I couldn't. And I was playing too many video games and like, oh, I'm a business guy. And like,
Right.
but then my wife got pregnant.
Then it gets serious.
In 2011, all of a sudden I was like, oh, snap. So then I just joined a bunch of networking groups and just the hustle was on full throttle ever since. So.
Yeah. Okay. So that totally tracks. That all makes a lot of sense. So take us into, you've already mentioned, there's sort of the world pre-pandemic and the world post-pandemic.
Right.
So starting in 2011, like you're really getting your hustle on, getting out there, working those extroverted muscles that you have. When does your interest in things like Web3 and NFTs start? When do you, so I'm going to ask two questions and you can piece it apart. And then when do you start doing, in addition to the hustle around building your business, when do you also do your creative work? Like, has that been going the whole time? Is that something that's churning for you?
Yeah, those are both great questions. And it's funny because they coincide exactly. So I indie hustle, right? 2011 hits. I start really like pushing, networking, going hard. I quickly need employees, right?
Yeah.
I quickly need people to help me out. And it quickly becomes clear to me that nobody can sell this shit like I can sell it, right? So I try to get some salespeople to help me. I've had probably a decent handful of them. None of them have ever been able to move the needle in a meaningful way, right? Which means I can't delegate that.
Right.
Which also means I need to delegate the creative part, which was crazy, right?
So do both, yeah.
Right. So I delegate the creative part, right? And the old mentality, like if you're working in the business, you're not working on the business,
right.
is so true.
Right.
I couldn't be doing all the things. So I started to bring on some of my first graphic designers and then illustrators. And then I found out some of my illustrators were animators. And then we started offering animation. So we started pivoting the whole business and growing. And like a huge pinnacle moment was when I hired Ross Chupa, who's still my creative director like 11 years later, out of Art Institute, I think like 2012. So maybe it's like 13 years now, 20, I don't know, 12 years. He is amazing at illustration and animation, and I taught him graphic design. So as I'm doing all that, we're evolving the business. 2020 hits. Like we just started getting, so from like 2011, it took 9 years for us to get a really big household name. We landed a project with SyFy.
Nice.
And then we started getting projects from there. And then that whole list I rattled off earlier has evolved. But like that first one was like, hey, we did it for SyFy.
Yep.
And then we won a Gold Addy and Best in Show. And like, this is really amazing.
We can do
and
it
then
for you.
And then I was able to build this big lever off of that where I'm just like, I can do more, right? So like, and then, then all the doors open, right? Because if you get one household name in your portfolio, now you can do, you're not like some shop that isn't tested, right? Fast forward, the economy crashes, shit goes crazy, and we're like, oh wow, this is gonna be great, and then I lose like $70,000 of work in like a week, right?
Wow.
And we're still really small, so that hurt. That was huge. It was painful. I went into survival mode, kind of batten down the hatches. Good thing I already knew how to live lean, right? Like I got my expenses down to like $2,500 a month. Right? It was super lean during that time, maybe even less than that. So during that time, my buddy comes to me, and my dad actually had passed away in 2016, and I went on that whole journey of losing my dad, and he was my best friend, and like all this inspiration of my whole life, and like I never got to like. Like I said, I didn't really hit it big till 2019. So like he never even got to see that, which like really like broke me up a lot. And like, so I've been on this whole journey. I've been documenting that and creating stories and putting that out on my social media. So 2021 hits and the NFT craze starts to come out, right? Like, and I've got a bunch of buddies in the, entrepreneur space. And my buddy Chris comes up to me. He's like, man, have you really looked at these NFTs yet? And I've been following crypto, but I'm not one of those guys that bought Bitcoin in 2012. He'd probably be sitting on a beach somewhere right now. But he comes to me, he's like, dude, you got to do something with this. And he started breaking down NFTs for me and how that it can create two things: a digital ownership economy that allows for certificates of authenticity of tangible, real things, as well as creating a situation of scarcity and actual tangible ownership over a digital good, right? So that like, even though there's thousands of copy, like you can provably own the one, right? And that may or may not make sense to some people, but when you start thinking about like how digital our lives are now, and especially the next generation, and how much like even in Fortnite, how much skins mean to kids and what that is, those could easily be digital assets and they are digital assets. They're just not NFTs. And that's, their decision as a company, but they could, in a different perspective, make those so that they're interchangeable and the people that own them could buy, trade, and sell them outside of the network through the blockchain, adding more value to the consumer. But I digress a little there. So the NFT space is what revitalized my creativity, right? So I started building this business up, started hiring artists, lost my dad in 2016, really had like an emotional breakdown about like, I never really took the time and energy and effort to do collaborative art with my dad, right? So I started doing some of that after he died, taking some of his pictures. So like early 20, so he died in 2016 in June 25th. So I think August or September, a few months later, after I'm done, like just sitting around crying, being stoned for weeks at a time, just like my team was running my company and I just like broke, right? Like, and they kept it running too, which was, oh, a godsend. They loved me that much. Like I just disappeared, like, and they're just like, dude, we got you. And it was like, that was the first time I really knew, like, I have a company and it's people that really care about me. So humbling. So anyways, I'm doing the art with my dad's art, posthumous collaboration, the first one. I'm drawing these things, and like I just, something lights up in me that I was long dormant, right? That creativity of Carl from 6th grade, excited to send in his portfolio to this thing, like on a level that like, I got some of that again in college, obviously, and I was kind of going in every direction, but like this was the first time like I found my art.
Yeah.
And it was through my dad, right? So he had these like crazy sketches, and if you go to my website, you can see some of this stuff. But like simple little line art sketches, and I'll just take it and I put it on a light box and made a copy of it because I couldn't even bring myself to deface his little sketch that he probably spent 5 minutes on while he was on the phone, doesn't even remember doing, right? Like, and like some of these are from like 1970, right? He didn't even want kids. Like I was born in 85, right? So like I have stacks of his notebooks of art that like he made in a time when he didn't even know he would ever be married or have kids or anything. And like, I found them like in my mom's shed, all like decrepit and moldy and shit. And I saved them. Right. Okay. And now I'm turning them into new art at like 2020. Like I started that in 2021. Yeah. So it's all good. And I started doing that. And it just felt amazing. Yeah. So the first piece I did was 2016, did it with colored pencils, did another one. I did like 4 or 5 of them. Okay. Right. So fast forward now back to 2021 when Chris hits me up, tells me I should do all of my dad's art as an NFT collection because I have 700 pieces of his art. He's like, so dude, let's take them, make digital copies of them. If you buy the NFT, you get the art as well, right? Because the art's, I have 45 of these up on my ceiling and my walls. Every room in the house is like covered in colorful craziness, and it's beautiful and I love it. But like, I still have, another 660 amazing pieces of art that need to be in the world, right? So I said, all right, let me mint this collection. Let me understand about NFTs. And as the more he explained it to me, I just dove headfirst into this, like, oh my God, this is amazing. I love this stuff. So started seeing how like I could make my father into a famous artist using Web3 and NFT to create a permanent archive of his creative works and his legacy in the blockchain, right? Yeah. So when he was dying, I was taking care of him for like 3 months. Okay. And he got really upset one day because he said he felt like his art never got its due. And like my father was a genius with color and just expressiveness through his artwork. And he basically did like crazy faces that are like abstract coming out of these like ethereal watercolor puddles of madness. And then he just had the ones that were just puddles of madness, but also they're like beautiful too. I don't mean to make a negative spin on it. Some of them were, like, so you look at some of them, you're like, this person is deeply fucked up inside. Like, and he would say the same thing, right? And he's like, and some of them are just like the opposite, the yin to that yang, right? Like, so I say all that to say like this stuff all inspired me, and I took it and I took 72 pieces of one of his styles, the faces, and I made faces of a mad artist, right? And that's an NFT art memoir, which to this date I think is still the only NFT art memoir ever made that I'm aware of, and like little stories in each one in the metadata, like of descriptions of like what I think about the art and what I think about this and what this reminds me of my father and this one story and blah blah blah, and like all that put into these pieces of art minted on the blockchain, forever there now, so that it can be discovered. Even if I fail at making him a famous artist, like this art is there on the internet, on blockchain, right? Recorded in an immutable record, as long as like Arweave never goes down and like all these other things, and Ethereum's still around and Google doesn't go, back. So basically pending like a solar flare, this stuff will be here forever, which, it's pretty cool. So, and then my work kind of spun up out of promoting that collection. So after I'd done those 4 or 5 pieces, Chris was like, well, could you do stuff like this? How long does it take you to make one of these? I was, I don't know, like 2 hours, right? Like 3 hours maybe, especially because I did one digital, and that's the one we were really referencing. He's like, well, what if we did one every week, like on a live stream, and you could promote the collection for like the next, 4 months, right? And then get people excited about the drop. And then we did a show in New York City where I had like printed 1-of-1 originals of all the pieces I had made promoting the drop of the collection. So that's where it started, right? Like that like got me back engaged in my art. I hadn't really been doing art for the business in years because I just was focused on the business. So basically art school, built the business up for a few years. I'd say about 2012, 2013, I'm no longer doing art in the business. So 2013 to like, when my dad died, I started doing a few pieces, but I hadn't done any art, like tangible colored pencils or painting, because I did some watercolors and colored pencils. At that time was 4 pieces.
Okay.
And then I took them digital. So, and kind of the rest is history. I've been live streaming every Wednesday night for almost 3 years now, making new pieces of art. So I'd start with something, either a photograph of mine or some sort of piece, but every piece is layered in with my dad's art as textures and colors. Sometimes I'll take his faces. I've done like probably 20, 30 new faces that start with like a line art sketch of his, and I just go freaking crazy on it. I collaborate with the live audience, and it's like so like healing. It's really been healing. Yeah, because I'm honoring his creative legacy and keeping the idea of all of that, of his creativity alive in me, using and collaborating with his art, right? Like, it just feels fucking awesome. Like,
well, and I can hear the joy and the enthusiasm that you're communicating when you're talking about this, but I can also see how there's something cathartic about working through this, working in this way. That detail that you shared about your father lamenting that he wasn't as well known as he wanted to be as a creative, as an artist, I think really struck a chord. And then that idea where art is a place where you can almost role play a little bit and present things that may not be what the version of yourself that everyone sees on a daily basis or on a regular basis. So you can express things that you might not be able to express in other ways, even if you're very outgoing. So it feels like there's a lot of layers to this as you're working through this with your father's work and your own work in tandem.
Yeah, it really, it's like so true, pure art, right? Like, it's just deeply emotionally meaningful to me. And I'll tell you, like, leading up to my father dying, like, whenever you lose somebody really foundational in your life, right? Whether that's your best friend or your spouse or your kid or any, like, and there's different levels. I'm not trying to equate or higher level, lower level compare with anybody's grief, but like someone that's deeply meaningful to you, it changes you, right? And I spent hours just like, what am I, like, just thinking about life, and like, now my dad is just this idea, right? Like, he's just these memories and this legacy and these artwork, but like the ideas of how I live and how I value life and like what I find important are still deeply resonating in me. And I put that out into the world through my live stream, through things like this podcast, right? Like, and then building on top of that with his art also. So now there's this tangible medium where I get to do that, right? And my dad he used to say all the time, he's an entrepreneur. Like, he did a whole bunch of shit, right? Like, so like that's exactly what he'd say. But like, he was an amazing musician. He played acoustic music and could sing, and he could do all sorts of, like, he had restaurants. I mean, amazing chef, like, could make just like mouth watering. You would, like, it's blow your mind, right? But like, there's 3 of us. I have 2 brothers, right? And we've all kind of picked up some of his talents and run with them. Like, I'm deeply in the creative space, deeply in the visual space. One of my brothers like plays a lot of music, and the other one actually plays the bongos. One of them plays acoustic guitar, and they both love to sing. And they both are chefs, and they've been on TV shows and run restaurants. So like, we've kind of like all took parts of him that inspired us and kind of run with it, right? So it feels really good, man. It really does. And one last part on that catharticness, right? Like, I'm so 2016, I think it was early 2017. I'm working on one of these pieces of art. I forget that we don't have a visual here, but
And by the way, just a visual for the listeners, and we'll take a screenshot of this when we're done. I want you to point out, I want you to show the toe shoe and then point out some of the artwork, and you can absolutely see this during your live stream. But the room that you're sitting in, your office, is covered in art. Your ceiling is covered. You've got one of your brick walls that, absolutely. There is wall space, but there isn't a whole lot. Like, you've got a lot packed in there.
Yeah, for sure. It's as much as possible, right? Like, maximalist. How do we transform these? Some people get excited about a brick wall. I'm just like, that's a good start. Like, So here's like, so my spirituality kind of like, I kind of left organized religion a long time ago. I grew up like many people in this country, very Christian, and I'm not knocking that. And like, I'm all for anything that makes you a better person, right? Makes you feel better, makes you treat other people better.
Sure.
But for me, I kind of stepped away from all that. I was just sort of in the rat race of life, right? And when my dad died, I started having all these like really profound experiences that I have no way to differentiate or say that it could be anything other than what it appeared to be. So yeah,
can you give us an example of? Do you mind sharing an example of like one thing that happened?
I'd love to. I'm trying to compose myself because I have never been able to tell this story without crying. So
okay.
It's okay. Like I love it. It's part of, it's part of the journey of life. Right. So look, I'm doing this piece of art. It's like 2 a.m. Okay. It's the second or third one of those little collaborative faces I've ever done. Right. And I'm doing the thing and I'm drawing, I'm like deep in it. And I just start losing it. Like I feel him with me every time I'm doing one of these. Like he's the energy. It's hard to explain if you haven't ever felt something like that. But like I'm deep in thought about him. I'm doing this art on top of his art and just crying and losing my shit. And I get a phone call on my phone at 2 a.m. on a Saturday from this from this woman that like I don't know at all. We're friends on Facebook, but she used to date my father. She lived in Florida. My dad was in Florida for a while. They had a really awesome relationship from what I can tell. And so she speaks. I can't not do this, but like she's like I think she's Ukrainian or Russian or somewhere in that area. Deep, heavy accent, you know. And she calls me up and I pick up the phone and I see that I was like I know who she is, right? So I answer the call and I'm just like this is bizarre, but like I'm losing my shit, like I'm stoned, I'm crying, I'm snotting, I'm like I'm a mess, like whatever, let's take this fucking phone call, it's gonna be fun, right? Like so I pick up the phone. just layer some more shit onto this experience.
Maximalist.
So glad I did. She goes, Carl, I promise you I'm not crazy. First words I've ever heard from this woman in my entire life, right? Like your father and I were, your father was magical and so special. I've never met anyone like him, and our bond was so deep. And I don't know how to say this, but I was just asleep and dreaming about him, and he came to me and told me that I had to wake up right now. This is crazy, right? I have to wake up right now and call you and tell you that he's proud of you. And like, it's like shit is so fucked up. I can't even say it.
Wow.
So it's like, holy shit. Like, what was that? Right? Like,
how is that even possible?
How is it possible? Right? Like, that's not Christianity or Judaism or Islam or whatever your book you're into.
Yeah.
Like, that's just like my dad's on the other side and communicated somehow through a person at the exact right time. Like, no. So,
wow. Like, that's not stuff you can plan. That's not something that you can expect. That's not something. And I think also you have to receive it for the gift that it is. Whatever your philosophy is, whatever your foundational belief system is, just lean into it.
Yeah, dude, it's so crazy.
Wow.
So, but yeah, he's just like, I'm so proud of you, and you're building. You're greater than what I could have ever imagined. Like all this shit, I can't even say it back because it's just too emotionally overwhelming, but so inspiring, right? So that just catapulted me, right? Like, oh my god, I gotta keep doing art. Yeah. So it took me a while to get into a rhythm and figure that out, but like. Man, here we are now, like 2024. Like, again, I live stream every Wednesday night. Every piece I do has my dad's stuff in it, and it just feels like $1 million. Yeah. The whole thing is just deeply, deeply moving. So, yeah, there's that.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. That is just hearing you tell that story moved me. I don't know all of the particulars, but from what you shared, I can't imagine someone not being shook in some way if they had a similar situation happen to them.
Yeah, it's so.
And talk about validation. Yeah,
right. Yeah, wow. Exactly.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's funny. I told that story. I do that every time I tell a story. I try so hard not to like. I'm like, I got it this time. Like I'm psyching myself up. Like never happens. It's too visceral. It's too deep. It was too moving. Yeah. I got up and I told this at Boston Blockchain last year on the stage. Same thing. Crying my face off. Right, and people coming up to me afterwards like, dude. I didn't know I was gonna be crying at a blockchain convention. Like.
Right.
So it's just cool, man. I love it. It's like, and I love that I was raised by a man that like taught me like the real parts about being a man of integrity and character and standing up for people. It has nothing to do with whether or not you fucking cry about something that's crazy, deeply moving and emotional, right? Yeah. And it's like, it's pretty. I just am grateful for that, right? Like I have no reservations about crying in front of anybody. I actually have this weird thing. Maybe I should have said this earlier. Like I don't get embarrassed. Like I've only been embarrassed maybe a handful of times in my life, and it was like, for the most part, like things that are like society norms, like a man crying or like, maybe like, I don't know, anything you can think of. Like, I don't care. Like I'm living my life so intentionally that like other people having a negative opinion about the choices I make just doesn't bother me at all.
Right. Feelings are feelings. And I don't personally believe that you can argue with people's feelings. And I also think that it's okay if they spill out in a way that you don't expect it. And I think that's when you know your friends, that's when you know the people who support you. And I think that's authentic. And there's a lot of this myth of authenticity and this myth of actually a couple of things that you talked about, like what it means to be an entrepreneur. Like it doesn't look the same for everyone. It can't.
No, it can't. Yeah, because the journey's inside, right? Like everybody's totally different, right?
Right.
On the grand spectrum, right? Like we all have similarities and there's archetypes, whatever, but like the individual configuration of you is you. Even my identical twin brothers are very different, right? See. Yeah. So like, it's interesting. So the journey you go on is all about like your strengths, your weaknesses, your experiences, and then how you react to those things, right? So the journey's always different. Like, I mean, it took me 10 years to get like anywhere worth talking about. Like most people, reasonable human beings have quit and moved on to 2 or 3 careers by then. Like, I'm just like, I'm going to figure it out. Right. Like, it's like, you need that though, I think.
Yeah, I think so. So I want to go back into 2 different areas, and the voiceover that you gave for NFTs, which stand for non-fungible tokens, is one of the better ones that I've heard. Maybe even the best one that I've heard. But can you explain for people in the audience who may not understand what NFTs are and some of the conventions of Web3? You have a physical piece of artwork that your father did.
Yes.
And then you add to it sort of almost improvisationally in some way. So yes, and we've talked about that a couple times already in the conversation. And then how do you assign a digital token, this NFT, to the artwork itself?
Sure. So there's a couple different methodologies for that. Okay. The one is just like, I'm a person, and I'm, a business, and I'm selling a thing. And like, so no different than when you buy when I buy this t-shirt online, what I'm buying is a transaction for this little JPEG on the screen that I decided means something, that this person has an agreement that they're going to ship me a t-shirt, right? Sure.
Like it's a representation of,
I didn't walk into a store and hand them cash and they handed me a shirt. So that transactionally is the same kind of way that you can do NFTs, right? Okay. And the NFT part of it has value because what you can do is say, all right, the person who bought this physical piece of art gets this NFT that's in a record that's permanent and unchangeable, right? So while the record is unchangeable, right? That's like it layers inside a blockchain. There are NFTs where you can adapt them as they change time or hands or values. There's a lot. Anything you can program can go into an NFT. Okay. Let's take a step back and talk about like just high level. So NFT stands for non-fungible token, right? Yep. So a non-fungible token, it means that it is a unique asset. So I never heard about fungibility prior to working in Web3, but fungibility is essentially a financial term that says like, if you have a US dollar bill and I have a US dollar bill and we swap them, no one had a value exchange. We have like yours has a different serial number on it or whatever, but it's the same thing as mine. Like there's no change in value.
Got
so
it.
that's fungibility.
Okay.
So if I wanted to create an NFT, let's say if I wanted to make this dollar bill non-fungible, we're not talking about the technology side, we're just talking about nomenclature.
Yep.
I could take this dollar bill and draw a piece of art on it.
Okay.
And if I'm Picasso, this is now worth a whole lot more than a dollar bill, and it's not the same as your dollar bill anymore because I've modified it, right? It's now not fungible, right? So that's just a high level kind of what's the word I'm looking for here?
Just a high level understanding, a high level
what's that word,
explanation.
There's a term.
Example, metaphor.
There it is. That's what I was thinking. I think it's a metaphor, whatever. Anyways. So that's the idea behind and also on the flip side of that, if I'm a terrible artist and no one likes my work and I'm not known, this probably dollar bill might not be worth anything anymore, right? Now it's also non-fungible. It's not even currency, right? It has no value.
Right.
So that happens in blockchain. So what blockchain is basically a record, right? So there's a piece of cryptocurrency that starts in this wallet. So I think about it like visualize a spreadsheet, right? Okay. And the spreadsheet, every cell represents a transaction, and it's either a currency and a wallet address. So if you think about it in a physical aspect, basically, if I created all of the Carl money and it was in my wallet, let's call it my mailbox at my house, right? Okay. Let's say there's 10 of them. Well, I can take one out and give it to you, right? So now I have 9 here, and there's a record that there was 10 originally, and I've given one to you, and that you accept that, and now that is recorded into the record. So now there's a record that I used to have 10, and I have 9 now, and 1 went to you. Yep. And so that's how blockchain works. Every time something moves, a record is created, right? The power of it is that the people everyone holds a ledger, a copy of this record. Okay. And in order for any transactions to happen, the records have to be checked that everyone who supports one of these copies of this record has the same base record as you, right? Okay. That keeps people from adding or subtracting money that doesn't exist, right? So that's high level of blockchain, right? So just recording where things started and where they went in perpetuity. So it creates a chain of events. It started here, went to Fred, went to John, went to Timmy, went back to Fred, went boom, 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 boom. And it can be broken into fractions, or it could be like the whole thing. It tracks every aspect of it, right? And these are just text records. They're not huge things, but they are becoming bigger and bigger. But the long story, and people are developing ways to manage all that and more succinct methods. But that's the idea behind it. And the power is the people that have these ledgers, let's call them nodes, which is how it's referred to on some blockchains. So each node is on a different computer, on a different server, in a different country, all across the world. So there's no one governing authority or governing group of people. It's decentralized. That's the power, right? So in order for you to sabotage this record, you'd have to hack 51% of the computers simultaneously to change the ledger so that the ledger now reads something else that isn't the case. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because it reconciles with everyone immediately for every transaction.
Got it. So it flows all the way through. There's some level of transparency. You can understand where these individual pieces went from here to here to here.
Pure transparency. Actually, the only thing you don't know is who owns that wallet.
I see.
So that's the pseudonymous nature, right? Like, I don't know whose wallet this is, but you can make the wallets public and you can so the pseudonymous nature is that like you don't have to make your wallet publicly known that it's yours, and you can make 1 million wallets right now and all that sort of stuff. So we have that base understanding of how blockchain works. Now let's get back to NFTs and fungibility, right? Yep. Cryptocurrencies are fungible. If you get a Bitcoin, I have a Bitcoin, we swap them. They're fungible. Yep. Same thing with Ethereum. Ethereum is like NFTs are on a whole lot of different blockchains, but the first thing that came big on was Ethereum. Okay. So let's say in Ethereum, right? I have a piece of Ethereum, and I want to create an NFT. So what happens is a smart contract is written, and there's something called pinning that it basically says this piece of cryptocurrency is permanently associated with this file, right? And it's just like linking on the internet, right? Okay. So now you have an NFT. So you go from Ethereum, which is fungible, to a non-fungible version of Ethereum that's permanently connected to this piece of artwork or this whatever. And the magic of the smart contract that connects those things, in the simplest version, it connects there, right? Like this NFT is connected to this file. Okay. And the more complicated versions, there can be any sorts of if-then statements and variables programmed into that. So like you can say, you and I can create a smart contract that says this NFT will move to the wallet of whoever bet whoever bet on this game, the winner of the bet on this game. So we can bet on team A and I'll bet on team B, and we can put in what's called an oracle, meaning like a reference point of like, hey, Fox News or ESPN or blah, blah, blah. And then at the end of the game, set in whatever, you can program all of this into a smart contract, which is wild, right?
Wow.
So we could say, all right, so we're going to bet that at the end of this game that if my team wins, I get the NFT, and if your team wins, you get the NFT at certain time frames. So we say the game will be over at the latest by this date. So then it'll check these websites, right, at this date, and whichever one comes back as the reconciled winner, the action is then taken, and the NFT then moves to your wallet, right? Like that can be done. So it removes the need for trust at all, right? Because if you and I make a bet on a game and I'll give you this baseball card, if the Bulls win, and you give me this thing if they lose, and then I go, I don't like that. That was bullshit. There was some bad calls on the ref or blah, blah, blah. Like I could renege on that. That's not okay, right? So that's the power of blockchain. Now there's also things called, what I got excited about is that there's royalties in the blockchain, right? So what if we can make a smart contract that says every time that this NFT is sold on a marketplace and there's a transactional value, X% of that value goes back to the original minting wallet, which is always in the record because it's on the blockchain, right? This asset started here at this wallet because that's when it was recorded in the ledger. So let's say I sell it for $100 to you. Great, I get my $100, right? Now let's say you sell it for someone else for $1,000, because look, you're an art dealer. You knew you had a guy that would buy this, so you got this steal. Like, and that's how the art world works right now. I bust my balls and I do this painting for $2,000, and this guy's like, oh, I got a guy over here that'll pay 20 for it. That guy made $18,000 and I made $2,000 and I did the hard work, right? Like, so, and look, that's never going to go away. Sales is the foundation of capitalism, right? Like if you don't have a buyer and a seller, like, that's the big thing. But the cool thing is you can program into that any level of royalties. So as this transacts the second time, you sold it for 20K, I can put 50% of that is mine. I get half that. Or, the standard's usually 10, but like, so 10%. So I would get, $2,000 off of that again, or back to my thing, right? That's amazing. Right? And that's automated, right? Those transactions are automated. And the really, really powerful part is that wallet lives in perpetuity.
I see.
Right? That contract lives in perpetuity. So I can give my kid the keys to this wallet, and that can be a family heirloom. That can be an asset that generates money in perpetuity. Like that's wild. Right. So anyways.
So
did that answer your question? That was a
100%. Absolutely. And I think you hit all the points that I was curious about. It sounds like this decentralized nature of the network and the NFT and the currency is, I didn't realize that potential repeating value of it. So it can be something that, like, just because an artist sells something at, whether a visual artist or a musician or whatever your trade is, if you have a token attached to that, then you can also reap some of those benefits 2, 3, 4, 100 people down the line.
Yeah, for forever, right? Like that's the thing, right? So that was
as long as the technology doesn't, because you said something earlier about like some of the technology pieces that connect it.
Yeah, well, it's this, if we still have the internet and people still believe that crypto has value, then there'll still be trades and transactions. These blockchains will still exist, and so I don't see a world where that happens. That isn't pure apocalypse, right? Like everything else went to shit at the same time. That makes sense, fine. And I don't, for the record, that's viable in my head. Like I'm also just like sort of a prepper on the side. So don't worry about me. I got this. I'll be doing art with sticks and mud in the backyard. I don't care. I think there was one other thing that I wanted to mention about, you said like connecting an NFT to an asset, and I didn't really answer that question. I answered it with like the simplest form of like, you bought a thing from me and I told you it comes with the painting, so I'm going to send you that. But you can have an encrypted QR code on the back of a painting that's programmed into the smart contract that doesn't allow the NFT to be moved until you scan that that encrypted QR code that is part of the programming of how that NFT moves. So the royalties activate. And so the if-then statements say like, if money is agreed to on this thing, and if this is scanned, then transfer the NFT, right? So it can really be a digital certificate of authenticity. I see all luxury brands going this way. I also see like deeds to houses and things of that nature where the systems are so stupid and so archaic. Like you need title insurance just in case someone sold you some property they didn't even own because 4 generations ago somebody fucked something up at some clerk thing and put it the wrong, like it gets crazy, right? It's but if we run all that through a system and now it's all on the blockchain, like there is no need for that because the records are permanent and immutable, right? Like where this was. There's no it's all clarity there, right? So as the governments and local governments and federal governments start to adapt these systems, I think there's going to be a lot of amazing stuff in that space. And it's getting easier and easier to use. Like when I first got into this, just getting cryptocurrency at all was insane. Getting it off of like Coinbase was insane. Setting up a wallet was insane. Integrating with all, like the whole process of actually minting NFTs was like you had to be a super tech guru on some levels. And I spent, probably 100+ hours reading and researching and learning just because I was obsessed with it because I thought it was so powerful. But now it's like PayPal. You can put crypto in your PayPal account. It's getting more and more easy to have NFTs, and there's more and more accessibility as the banks bring into it because the banks aren't going to ignore industries that are generating billions of dollars of revenue for but so long before they need their slice of pie.
I even think that I saw down the street at the grocery store, there was one of those coin changer machines. And I think you can coin change into Bitcoin.
Yeah. I'm not surprised. It's coming.
Yeah, it's coming. Well, we've talked about a lot of different things in a lot of different places, and we'll include links at the end of the show. But Carl, is there something that we haven't talked about yet that you wanted to get into?
Man, I don't know. I feel like I've done a lot of talking. We're going to hit
covered a lot of ground.
We hit all the major food groups of my life for sure. If you want to get into a little bit of self-reliance and backyard growing, and I've got 12-year organic heirloom tomatoes that I've been growing from seed every year, cross-hybridizing them with other types of tomatoes that I like, and then artificially selecting. And by that, I mean, I pick the ones I like to take to seed next year and eat all the rest of them. We can talk about all that, but I love growing food and experimenting with just the natural world, and all that inspires my creativity. And I take pictures of stuff and then photo bash them into Photoshop. I don't know. That's my whole jam, man. I'm out here just living my life.
I have to say, we have some friends who have a backyard garden, and they have this demarcated area. They also have chickens, and they have lots of different things. They have about, I think, a half acre of land, not a lot, but enough. And the other day they had this basket of little tiny yellow tomatoes that they had just picked. And I thought I might be having some kind of out of body experience because I've tasted garden tomatoes before, and I've tasted more supermarket tomatoes than garden tomatoes. But I didn't understand what I was tasting, because it almost tasted like I'd just eaten a grape. It was so sweet and bright in a way that a supermarket, or even a farmer's market for that matter, farmer's market comes closer, but when you're closer to the source. And I was just, I had to stop for a second. And my friend Trisha was like, have you never had one of our, and I don't remember what they're called, the yellow little tiny tomatoes. Have you never had one of our yellow tomatoes before? And I said, no, I've never had one of these. And she's like, it's clear from your face that you're having an experience. And so, +1 to that idea. We don't garden in our family, but there's something categorically different about tasting something from someone's home garden that's different than even if you buy it from a really good farmer's market. I don't care what the stamping is on there, like organic, sustainable, blah, blah, blah. All of the catchwords, definitely different from what you would get in sort of a run-of-the-mill supermarket.
100%. I think what people don't understand, that nature comes in infinite varieties. Every part of nature comes in infinite varieties. What we know as a tomato, right? Like you say tomato and someone's like, oh, this is a little red thing here. And tomatoes come in every color. My tomatoes are green, purple, and red striped. and the
Oh,
inside
wow.
fully ripe are green, right? But I've seen
Okay.
yellow, I've seen deep purple, I've seen black, I've seen everything in the world. It reminds me of this photograph that I saw that this amazing photographer did all these figure art nudes
Uh-huh.
of a bunch of Olympic athletes. So you
Oh,
have like this tiny little ripped like Russian lady that's like 4 foot nothing, super pale, and then like this huge Samoan guy, right? Like
yeah.
genetically, we are all human beings, but the range
Yeah.
of skin tone, size, variation, everything you can think of is like they don't look like the same. They look like different creatures entirely, like from the
Yeah.
tiny little gymnast lady all the way up to like the 500-pound like Samoan sumo wrestler or the Hawaii,
Hmm.
what the whole range. Like, so that, really hit me one time. And then I was listening to Charles Darwin's book on the origin of species when I really
Okay.
started to get into nature. So I'm just out in the garden listening to this book and just like really, I like to immerse myself in this shit if you can't
Sure.
tell, right? And it was talking, just in the state of New York, right? So apples are huge in New York, the
Yep.
apple state, right?
Yep.
Like, or whatever, right? There was tens of thousands of types of apples in New York. And in fact, apple trees
Hmm.
have indeterminate seeds, I believe is the term it's called. There's some botanist out there that's going to butcher me on that, but they don't generate a clone of their offspring, meaning like every time they roll the dice, the apples are so wildly different that they're not the same flavor, they're not the same texture. Some of them
Huh.
might be poisonous, they might be a crab apple, it might be a Fuji apple, could all come from the same parent,
Huh.
right? Because the level of genetic variation in their offspring. So like what you know as a Fuji apple and what you know as a Gala apple, these
Yeah.
are all clones of a parent plant, right? So what
Huh.
they do is they'll graft, they'll cut the bark on a branch,
Okay.
and they'll pack it with dirt, and then roots will grow right there. It's called layering. Then
Yeah.
they cut it off right there. Boom, you got a new tree.
Yeah.
So you're talking about genetically identical stuff so that you get what you're expecting. That's why if you buy a Gala apple anywhere in the world, they're all going to taste pretty much the same.
Sure.
Now you'll notice some of that backyard variety of like, oh, well, this one grew in my backyard and I live next to a water basin here and a watershed, and there's really
okay.
good soil, really good nutrients.
Yeah.
That'll up the flavor profile,
Sure.
which is part of what you were experiencing with your friend's backyard tomatoes.
Yep.
But the genetic information and expression in this is going to be the same because it's a clone. Now, if you plant, like what they'll do to start new variations is they'll plant thousands of seeds,
Okay.
and they'll go through and try and sample and check them all out, and they'll kill all but like 4 of them, right?
They don't make the cut.
They don't make the cut, and then
Yeah.
they clone those trees out into a whole orchard. Now, that's not how like tomatoes work. Tomatoes, they do cloning and stuff so that you get your types of tomatoes to keep the genetic information the same, because every time there's an offspring, there's variation. But like in
Right.
something like an apple tree, the variation is insane.
Right.
Whereas like my tomatoes, the variation is enough to where like, oh, like one year they all double lobed. Right?
Oh.
Like they came to be like Siamese twins, and I love that. But it was only like 20% of the crop did that. So I started picking those. So now my tomatoes are all bigger every year because I pick those. And then, so you pick the traits you want and get the seed from those, right?
I see.
So it's really exciting.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's almost like we need a whole other episode to talk about some of these other parts.
I'm happy to do it.
Actually, one thing that I wanted to get into just really briefly is this notion of entrepreneurship. I think there's a lot that's being made right now about the romance and the idea of standing up your own business. It's the American way, or the way in which things are invented. I think sometimes people who have started businesses are glorified in a way. But can you say a little bit about how entrepreneurship has played into the work that you do? I know we've already hinted at it, but if someone came to you today who, let's say they're a designer, maybe they're an illustrator, like they work something in the creative arts, they're like, hey, Carl, I really want to stand up my own business. What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I mean, the best advice is to take some time and really look at there's so many nuances into this space, right?
Yeah.
Like how I like to do graphic design or illustration. Well, what kind and for who and why, right? Like, so getting into the weeds of like, when you're working on a project, so this is how I got to where I'm at. Like, I found the things that I did everything for anybody that they would pay me to do in Photoshop and Illustrator, right? Like if it needed some graphic work, like I'm in it, let's go. I need money. I got a kid coming, right? Like, so in that process, I found out that like not all money's the same, right?
Yeah.
Not all clients are the same. So
Yeah.
figuring out, like, I really love doing maximalist type of stuff, and I really hated doing the dance on overly simplified stuff that didn't feel valuable at the end. And then the client always had some sort of like underlying value where I wasn't dealing with the right people at the time, obviously, but didn't appreciate it, like the magic and the simplicity, right? Like, but it's easier to see the magic in a well-balanced, like organized chaos, right? Like, so I say like find what compels you. Like, what's the stuff that puts you in your flow state, right? Is that t-shirt illustration? Is that some sort of photo manipulation? Is that 2D animation? Is that 3D animation? Is that graphic design? Is that logo design? Is that website design? Like, whatever thing. Is that photography? Is that a combination of all those in a way that nobody else does, right? Like, find your creative expression, build a brand around that. Then you can actually really have value. Right? Because if you're trying to compete for the lowest common denominator right now of I can do it faster or cheaper than somebody else, you're going to lose, right? AI is moving into those spaces. I don't know how the Fiverr community is going to survive in this space. Like, it's making pretty noise that doesn't have a lot of strategy behind it, that isn't uniquely an expression of you for a specific thing. Like, that's easier than it's ever been. And it's only going to get easier. So my advice would be to figure out what really excites you. What really is your special sauce? What are you like me and you have like a deep love of nerd culture and you really love illustration and animation and you've surrounded yourself with this whole company and you're into technology, so maybe you want to do NFTs for gaming and entertainment brands, but see how that all works. And now my passion lines up with my values, that also lines up with the things that I'm excited about in my normal daily life, right? So like when that all comes together, the value I can charge for that is so much higher, and I can actually live a nice life, right? I'm not saying you should take advantage of people, but I'm saying, you should get as much value as you can, especially when you're dealing with bigger and bigger companies. Like, they're getting millions of dollars out of your thing working, right? So charge them as much money as you possibly can get, right?
What the market will bear.
Yeah,
there's that area in which, like, what are you good at? What do you love doing? And there's a third area that's often talked about, and I can't remember what the third area is, but
it's ikigai. It's a Japanese thing.
There it is. There it is.
And it's, what are you good at? What do you love? What is there a market value for, and what can you get paid for? Right? Like, or
that's what it is.
It's what are you good at? What do you love? What the world needs, and what you can be paid for.
There it is. That's exactly what it is.
I like to pair that with wabi sabi, which is also a Japanese concept. Yeah, and it's the idea of like there's beauty in the imperfection and seeing the process and the tool marks on the thing, if you will. So finding that should be really rough and tumble, and you should get some bumps and scrapes and scratches along the way that remind you that this is where you're supposed to be and not over there, right? So
it's it's funny that we've talked a lot about these concepts, but like in NFTs, like, how do you know something's authentic? How do you know it's the real thing? We talked about a little bit with growing apples. Like, there's lots of overlapping themes, I think, in what we've been talking about in terms of how do you find that source of strength, that spring from which you're inspired, that you can, your work is replenishing to you and doesn't deplete you. So I think it's so important.
Agreed. Yeah.
Well, let's get it. Yeah, I love it too. So let's get into some of the closing questions. We have a little bit of a rapid fire set that we ask everyone.
Okay.
So Carl, is there a lesson that you've learned in your life or your work that you wish you would have figured out earlier?
Love the process.
Say more.
Yeah, love the process. Look, I wanted to, when I first started my first business, I was all this like, charged testosterone 19-year-old, like, I'm going to be on Forbes by the time I'm 30 and millions of dollars and blah, blah, blah. Okay. And like, at some point I felt like a failure in my 30s because I hadn't quite got, I'm 39 now, I'll be 40 soon. But like in my early 30s, especially like after my dad died and that like deep evaluation, and talking to my wife and talking through it and just like, love the process. Like, she's like, you might get hit by a bus tomorrow, Carl, and you have an amazing life. Like I wasn't, I'm still not rich. Like I still don't, I still have money problems like anybody else that, isn't stacking up hundreds of thousands of dollars, but I have a beautiful life and I love it. And if this doesn't equate to some sort of internal measurable value of success, that I live on my own terms and I work for myself since 2006, then like, what is success? Right. Like if that's not success, what is? Right. So like, love the journey. Right.
Yeah. Plus one to that. I think that we don't sometimes realize the things that we have until they're reflected back to us. Right. When people ask us questions or they talk to us and we reveal a little bit of that backstage, because there are lots of things that we assume about people. So I think trust the process. That's a really great lesson.
Thank you.
So Carl, what are you excited about right now? I mean, you're excited about a lot, but is there like, what are you listening to? Is it a book? Are you watching a show? Are you listening to a podcast? TV, movie, like what's up? Like, what do you like? What do you want to say to the audience in that they have to experience or go find this thing?
Well, that's a loaded question to ask a excitable human being like myself.
A maximalist.
Look, I'm not recommending this for anybody.
Okay.
But to truthfully answer your question, what I'm excited about right now is the good side of AI generation.
Okay.
So I've been using, large language learning models, the stuff with, like ChatGPT and stuff like that to help facilitate all kinds of shit in the writing and replying to emails and legal advice and everything. I could, like, the best assistant that knows all the shit about life. Like, that's what I've been using that side of AI for in terms of, the chat side. Yeah. But on the creation side, like, I've just learned how to create my own LoRa models, which is a local model on my computer based on my data sets. So what I'm really excited about right now is taking all of my dad's art and all of my art and building local models, right? And then taking that and literally having a system that can generate art based off of a prompt from me that my dad would do based on all of his art. So like literally like how fucking cool is that? Like
that's amazing.
Well, this is where I'm at. So I'm going to put all the faces into one model, right? Yep. All the weird little faces of art, like that, like my faces of a mad artist that I start like that. Just my dad's ones, not even mine in this set. Yep. And then I was thinking I'd take each one of them and put that into ChatGPT, the individual image, and ask it to describe this as a prompt. So then ChatGPT is going to describe it as a prompt. And actually, in my ChatGPT, I've taught it how to talk like me. So it will describe it in a way that I would describe it, which is also a cool other layer. And then put that back into my local AI. It's a stable diffusion model with a comfy UI, and have that generate a new face based on the description of the old face in my dad's style, using just my dad's artwork, right? So so is my dad's creativity literally is sort of still alive at that point, right? Like fucking mind blowing, right? And then I also want to take that, dump all of my hundreds of pieces that I've been working on into some other models as well, so that I can go, all right, well, I've got someone that came in that wants a piece of art. They don't maybe have a budget that's like, my time's getting more and more valuable, I also like love to collaborate with people. And I'm doing some stuff with the yoga studio right now. But so like, I want to be able to take photographs I take of them, throw them through in my AI art generator based off of my art, output something that's like 80% of the way there, and then Photoshop it. So save myself 3, 4, 5 hours of time, not stealing from other artists, but using a tool to expedite my skills based on my data set, right? Like, so that's what I'm fucking crazy excited about right now.
Like there's two parts of me in response. Like I don't know what to make of it. Like what you're describing feels fictional. Like there's no way that actually exists, but I do know they exist.
It's 100% real.
Wow.
And you can even do it with video, which is like, that's a whole, like, so can I record myself doing like a vinyasa yoga flow and then overlay my artwork style and crazy stuff that's also got my dad's stuff incorporated into it already, like manually, like, and turn that into a moving animation of me doing yoga in my art style. Like that's going to be the precipice. I'm hoping to have that fully fleshed out in the next month or so.
Wow. I can't wait to see your, are you documenting this process anywhere or?
Yeah. So I have all, I record everything I do. So
Okay.
like, yes.
Okay, cool. All right, next closing question.
Okay.
Carl, if you unexpectedly had a day off and you had unlimited resources and the ability to defy the constraints of space and time, what would you do?
Space and time. I guess man,
yeah, that's the monkey wrench. Like usually that's the part of the question that people are like, woof.
I mean, like it's really easy for me. Like I just go back and like hang out with my dad.
Oh.
I'd probably meet my granddad too. Maybe some of my ancestors and lineage on that front. But go see my mother-in-law. Like, go hang out with my people that have passed on. Like,
yeah,
what could be more profound than that? Like,
yeah.
I don't need money. I don't need time. I don't need what if I can go see dead people that I love, then I'm in for that. Like, it's a no-brainer. I'll come back here and you can offer me unlimited resources, whatever. Like that's more meaningful than anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
I don't know what that says about me.
But I think it values those connections. I was thinking of a movie called About Time. Came out about 10 years ago, I think. Was unfortunately billed as a romantic comedy. But I suppose it does involve a lot of romance and feelings and introspection in general. Anyway, Domhnall Gleeson, Rachel McAdams, Bill Nye. The men in this one family can travel back and forth in time. That's the premise. The main character tries all sorts of things to fix his sister's tumultuous life, to play table tennis after his father's diagnosed with cancer. But once you have a kid, you can't go back and forth in time in that same way because it changes the kid or even makes the kid disappear or not exist.
Got you.
One of the main themes of this movie is to be present and to live life to the fullest, that sort of thing. And yeah, sure, it's a romantic comedy, I guess, whatever. Ultimately, this message of the movie is just so powerful.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I love that. That's super cool. And had a thought. Maybe it'll come back to me.
Yeah.
I don't know.
All right, Carl, what do you think will be true in a year from now?
That isn't true now?
That isn't true now. Like, what's a prediction that you think will be true in a year?
Oh, I don't know. It's a crazy year, man. Like,
I know.
Got a big election coming up. Like World War III is on the brink. Terminator might pop up. I mean,
That's
like,
right. Yeah, lots of stuff.
Are we going iRobot, or is there like, oh God, I say NFTs are going to make a comeback in the next year.
Okay.
I think Web3 is actually going to be part of what helps save us from the indistinguishable insanity of AI.
Okay.
Like, again, if you have something that's validating the authenticity and origination of a piece of content from a legitimate source of content creation, be that like this C-SPAN camera that's watching Congress, like I think there's going to be some use cases there. It might take more than a year, but that's the thing I think I'm most excited about in predictability. I'd say for myself, I'm going to be healthier, stronger, better version of myself with making, better choices with the business and better choices with my life and embracing this journey I'm on. So.
Awesome. So Carl, there are going to be notes throughout the show as people are listening, but where can they find out more information about you if they want to learn more about you? Yeah,
so my informational hub is colorfulcarl.com.
Yep.
There'll be links there to my podcast called Pixel Retentive, which is on the art of business and the business of art, kind of how all that intersects. We're about a year and a half in on that. You can find links to my live stream, which is For the Love of Creativity with Colorful Carl. I live stream every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern on pretty much every social media platform, but I try to push everyone to YouTube and Twitch, but I'm on Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, where all the cool kids are,
That's right.
And then there's links to Epic Made. You can see some of the amazing work we're doing over there with my agency. And reach out, say hi. I love talking to people. Don't be shy. I'm not too good to talk to anybody, especially if you're a struggling entrepreneur or artist or someone where, I can really relate, like happy to give you any advice that I can and help you not suffer some of the pains that I suffered on my journey. So,
yeah. Well, thank you, Carl, for taking time to chat today. This has been sort of a tennis ball match of a conversation, just bouncing all over the place, but it's been quite replenishing for me And thank you so much for sharing.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for the kind words. Glad to be here, and maybe we'll do it again sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. Let's figure out another reason to get together.
Yeah, of course.
And that's it for this episode of the How This Works show. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate your support. We're really looking to grow our community this second season. Sharing the show with just one other person would be so helpful. Subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us online at howthisworks.show. That's 4 words with no dashes. Again, that's howthisworks.show. We're also active on a variety of social media platforms. I appreciate you tuning into this conversation with Carl today. I hope you got something out of it. I know I did. And until next time, remain ever curious, and we'll talk again soon.
I don't get embarrassed. Like,
Right.
I don't give a fuck. Like,
Right.
I'm gonna die one day, and I don't care about anyone else's opinion about how I live, because I love my life and I love what I'm doing and I love who I am.
Hold on. Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
You can. I can't hear you for some reason. Hold on. I don't know what just happened. Oh, I see.
I don't know.
Technology.
Did that fix it? No.
Yep, I got it now. I just couldn't hear you back. So could you repeat the last part of that? My wife actually, I think she just plugged in her headphones and my computer tried to connect to it. So that's all it was.
No worries.
Yeah.
No, I just said that, like, maybe this is something I should have mentioned earlier on, but it's like I literally just I don't get embarrassed. Like, it's,
Yeah.